Hey friends, it's 4:10 in the morning. We got a 9-mile run and I got a lot on my mind, so let's get to work today. I'm going to cover everything I've learned at Johnson & Johnson over the last decade, so that's kind of the topic of the day, and I'll check in every mile. All right, let me pop you in my head and we'll get to work. Oh, and it's raining. Yay.
Begin workout.
Hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but welcome to your weekly one-on-one, where I answer some of the internet's most challenging questions and try to breathe while I run. Now, I've made it my personal mission to help engineers, global leaders, and entrepreneurs find their way. And with 4 kids and life in Tokyo and being an entrepreneur, I'm a pretty busy guy, so I do my podcast on the run. So if you're down for that, looking forward to chatting as we explore, I don't know, 5 to 9 things I've learned during my career at Johnson & Johnson, depending on how long my knee holds up. All right, let's get to work. I know I'm just a shadow of a man right now. It's not even 5 o'clock yet, so it's maybe 4:30, 4:45. You got a nice city view though. Maybe you can get some lights. GoPros suck in the dark, but we'll catch a sunrise. It'll show up. Stay patient. So lesson number 1, welcome to mile 1. By the way, my knee is questionable. It kind of got a little messed up last Friday. I'm really focusing on form. It's definitely uncomfortable. I don't condone running through injury, even running through pain, but long distance is often uncomfortable, so we're monitoring the situation. Anyway, your first insight that I pulled from working at Johnson & Johnson is a really fun expression that I now call hurry wait. Hurry wait. I actually learned this from my manager when we were doing it was either a pig or goat lab, I can't remember. I work on minimally invasive surgical technologies. Oh, I'm avoiding puddles. I hate wet socks. At least it's not raining. But basically, in one of these labs, we make devices that you can use in handheld or eventually robotic surgery. And some of these devices are leveraged to seal vessels using various energy modalities. I'll keep it vague. But basically, if you're going to put a device in somebody's body and it's supposed to cut through a tube that's carrying blood, you got to be pretty darn sure that seal won't fail, causing the patient to not have hemostasis, which means bleeding occurs, and excessive blood loss can lead to all kinds of problems. And we have a special lab that I won't fully disclose, because while we share our test methods with the FDA from a regulatory perspective, we don't necessarily share it with our peers, although we all know what each other does. But at some point or another, you have to progress from what we call benchtop testing, where you have excised tissue pulled out of an animal, and you're cutting and testing in some novel way, to a live animate lab. You have an actual animal with real blood pumping, and you're going to test some stuff. And we would have certain labs where you have to be careful how much I share, but there'd be a type of animal, and you would do some kind of surgical procedure on said animal, and then Pulp Fiction style, adrenaline shot to the heart. That's not technically what we're doing, but we would elevate the animal's blood pressure an undisclosed amount, and then wait and see. Oh god, it's a big puddle. Oh god, here we go. That wasn't that bad. To elevate the animal's blood pressure and then wait and see and check the integrity of the seal. And these were called hurry wait labs. That wasn't the technical term, because there's always this mad rush to get the latest and greatest devices built with the best, perfect piece of software that we really thought would work. We tested all benchtop, we analyzed all the data, we're like, okay, I think we're good. Let's not go and kill a pig, or a goat or a dog or whatever the test method was. And then we get in the lab, everyone's scrambling, and then you fire on undisclosed special body part with undisclosed energy device, and then you wait. I'm making you wait. It's uncomfortable, but you wait a while. Like, I don't even remember how long it is, but it's way longer than you want to wait, and everyone's wearing their surgical outfits, and everyone's sweating and stressed, and then you're like, okay, check, it's good, and then you gotta go and do the same procedure on a different undisclosed anatomy, elevate that heart rate and wait. So it's a hurry wait lab. And once I was in a lab on an undisclosed device, had an undisclosed point in development of an undisclosed platform, and a seal in an undisclosed region of the body exploded, and based on the back pressure, blood can go pretty far, blasted the whole room. So we had hurried, we waited, we sealed, we're waiting, explosion, all of a sudden escalation. All of a sudden everyone's running, like, what is going on? How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. And that'll be mile 2. So let me pop you on my head, and we'll get to the second part of that story. Alright friends, making progress, still avoiding puddles. I am happy to say that the dryness of my socks is fairly fairly decent. I know I'm still a shadow head. We're about, I don't know, 28 minutes into this thing. Oh god, that's a puddle. What do we do with that? We're just boasting about our dry socks. What the frick? Alright. Left you on the edge of your seat there, right? I know. Very suspenseful when a undisclosed tissue explodes, shoots blood across the room. I was there. I saw it. Pretty intense, right? So, part 2 of hurry, wait. Something unexpected happens. Something that I immediately recognize as bad. So, what happens? Immediately, we're gonna get into this. Immediately, I escalate an email to the 3 bigwigs. The project director, the lead design engineer, and the lead production engineer. Reason being, and just to define these terms a little bit, for some of you that don't necessarily work in the same industry as me, because I know every company sometimes has different names for things. Your design engineer is typically, oh, it's beautiful. Maybe you're getting some of the light, but all right, about 4:45. Watch your pace, Joe. Slow down. There's no hurry, wait in this. It's just slow. But the project director, they're in charge or accountable for the overall scope and execution of any engineering project. They typically have multiple design engineers nested under them, although that's changed in recent times. So they own the personal development of the team that's making the device, but then they also have to work across other functions like quality, development. Development are the individuals who work with suppliers to actually get different components that are designed by the design engineers manufactured. They also have different metrics around COGS, or cost of goods. And then the lead design engineer, he's the lead of the design. He's accountable for whether the thing we've made is good or not. And typically, lead design has a fairly large team of design engineers as well as designers. Difference between those, it's kind of like a square and a rectangle. This is a grotesque understatement, but like a design engineer can be a designer. I'm gonna retract these words shortly, but a designer cannot be an engineer. Like, design engineer can leverage CAD, design something, but then also do all the engineering analysis to see if it will actually function as intended, which is super important. Whereas the designers, I want to be careful, are typically capped at CAD and designing the components, but not necessarily the engineering. The reason I cap it, I think skill sets are very fluid, and it's something I think J&J didn't do a good enough job of upserting and moving people between those two spaces. Anyway, blood vessel explodes. It wasn't a vessel. Who knows what it was? Was it an artery? I don't know. They're two different things. One returns blood, one sends blood. The blood went far across the room. I send out a freak out email. There we go. Here's real words coming. I was like, hey, this just happened. Everyone needs to get down to the lab right now. And the reason I sent that, with the best of intentions, was I wanted to make sure that if someone was responsible for the design, if someone was responsible for all the components and assembly of the devices, which was the development engineer, and if someone was in charge of the overall scope of the project and risk, which is the director, that all three parties were there. Also, in hindsight, I never emailed quality. Seems like quality would have been a good person to pull into that as their pre-approval What? Oh, it's wet grass all over my face. As their pre-approval was on the procedure. So hurry, wait. Everyone's hurrying, everyone's running in, everyone's gowning up. It's a very critical lab, you know. And word travels fast and far within an organization when there's a visible problem. And here's the problem. I didn't know the protocol. In engineering, we recognize that while we desire to create something that's perfect and saves the world is flawed. There's variability. Tissue's very variable. So because of that, and because of the wonders of statistics, there are certain test methods where it is acceptable for a certain amount of failures to occur. It's actually planned. It's actually normal. That's gorgeous. This was one such test method. So we'll get into on mile 3 kind of the fallout, the learning from this. But basically, just because something is scary, new to me, and feels like it needs to be escalated, maybe we need to take a moment and think. All right, get on my head, let's get to work. All right. Well, I would say you can almost see me, but you can't. It's still dark. Maybe 5:10 in the morning now. Is that right? I don't know what time it is. Maybe it's 5. So, blood splatters. Panic email sent. Everyone comes down, stops everything they're doing, immediately gets to the lab, right? Urgent text sent. Everyone in lab paused. Quality finally alerted. Things spiraled, and they spiraled quickly. They spiraled in a poor way. Word got around to all the other project teams. Caught my words there a little bit. And then, as we looked through the protocol, which even though I was running this, here we go, here comes a miss. Even though I was running the lab, I had approval of a portion of the protocol. Should have worked through all of it. Should have really understood it. We're moving too fast. That's no excuse, but it happens. And I didn't understand the statistics because I had delegated that to my quality engineer, which is good. But you should have an understanding of anything you sign off on. And technically, the lead design engineer signed off on it, but I was the one executing. So I should have known. Well, we found out it was fine. It's totally fine. No problem. No problem at all. Normal. Now, it might be unsettling for you to think about, well, hey, what if a surgeon's inside of me with that device and it blows up? First of all, that can happen. It's very remote. It's very rare. And also during a procedure, your surgeon's not normally giving you a shot of adrenaline through the heart, Pulp Fiction style, right? Which isn't how we do it, but it's for example. Whew. So, everything was fine, right? Wrong. Everything is not fine. Everything is bad from a communication fallout perspective. My project director is getting bumped into, by the head of global strategic marketing. Like, hey, I heard your device is killing pigs. That is not the conversation you want. As a project director, you have to control messaging. you know. So there's a lot of backtracking. A lot of VPs were engaging. Jets were being scrambled needlessly. When really, it could have been, hey, test ran as expected. There was one failure, which was within acceptable limits based on the amount of devices we were testing and known variability. And the project's clear to move on to the next stage, which is design verification. All right, this is like pre-DV testing. So let's kick off the production equipment. Let's get moving, right? Like that's what the story could have been. But because I couldn't navigate that, and I had this need to include everybody immediately, things spiraled quickly. So on the next mile, which will be mile 4, if we make it, I want to chat about what I could have done different, because it's a learning I've taken with me into almost any other leadership context. It's a good one. Pop on my head. Let's stay with it. Come on, knee.
Total distance 5 miles. Total climb annual 5 minutes and 36 seconds. Split pace 12 minutes 59 seconds per mile.
The squeegee, the almighty thumb. All right, mile 5, against all odds and fears, we're somehow running, even though my right hip is a little saggy from a form perspective. My left knee definitely ain't happy either, but I'm focusing ruthlessly on form and mellow pace, not getting caught in a hurry wait, because a lot of times when we run, we want it to end, and when we get in the mindset of wanting things to end, we go faster, which makes it harder, and we start stopping, walking, running, stopping, walking, running. I call it the trottle walk doom loop, right? Whereas if we could just accept, from a Japanese perspective, like shogunai, like it is what it is, just lock a slow but enduring pace and see how far your body can take you. Okay, so back to what the heck can you do, right? So we talked about sending a message that's much more controlled in tone. You know, hey, this is what occurred. We had a failure. This is everything we know right now. These are the actions I'm taking. And if you have margin, I'd love if you could drop by the lab, you know, help work the problem with me. But if not, let's connect before the end of the day, right? So that maybe they get that message and they're like, okay, there's a fire, stuff's happening, but it can burn a little longer. Let me finish this meeting, let me go to the bathroom, let me make my way down there in 45 minutes, and we'll see what we can find out. And that gives everybody some time to cool off and think, because you don't solve problems well when you're in crisis. Doesn't mean that crisis doesn't come for you. And a lot of times we are in crisis and still need to solve problems. But the idea is we can solve problems better if we at least shift our mindset out of crisis mode and break it down into what do we know, what can we do, you know, to improve our outcomes. So reduce the probability of failure, right? So how is it possible to actually respond that way? Well, the first thing I'll start with is in that moment, in that season of life for young Joe, owning his first pig lab and not knowing the protocol. There was no way for me to have known how to respond to that, because I had a natural tendency. It's not a bad thing, it's just a tendency. I had a natural tendency to put my hands in the air and say, hey, this problem's bigger than my subsystem. This could be your subsystem. I don't know. Get here. That was like the way that I would solve problems. And in my mindset, it felt inclusive, but I got really great feedback. I think actually prior to this situation that I just couldn't apply in the moment from my lead design engineer, Dave, on another situation. At that point, I owned robotics controls for an undisclosed robotic instrument. I was working with Dave on it. So basically, we had this company, Verb Surgical. It was a joint venture loosely between Google and J&J. There's different company pass-throughs associated with it. It's a big deal. And they were making a robot, which hopefully gets commercialized soon. I'd like to see it in real life. I worked on that platform for 5-6 years, and a large portion of that was with Dave. Dave's good people. And I had made all these robotic automations that would control a robotic interface that would, we'd load one of our devices on, it would home all the mechanisms, which means different motors would move in undisclosed ways to kind of tap off or find different internal features, and then be able to set either zeroed positions or zeroed torques depending on what kind of motor control we were using for what various subsystems. Again, keeping it vague. And I owned all of that, but then also like 13 different testing automations that would put our devices through their paces, and a lot of them were multimodal or multi-physics. So we'd have different end effectors and automations that could apply different loads or signals or things to do really I did cool stuff, okay? Did cool stuff that I can't really share. It was great. So anyway, I was responsible for all the cool stuff. And then the team, they were responsible for the nuts and bolts design work. Actually make the instrument. Now I'd give them feedback on what mechanisms I thought were or were not controllable, right, and challenges we may see from a software perspective based on different hardware decisions being made as we look to adapt legacy handheld mechanisms into robotics applications. And they're two different design spaces, so that there's challenges with those assumptions. So anyway, getting to the Dave story. This guy named Dave, lead design, worked on it. There's another guy, Clark, good guy, also design engineer, worked on a lot of components and mechanisms. This guy, Andy, he owned a lot of the interface between our device and the robot from a hardware perspective. And when I was looking at all the data in real time coming off these devices, I was like, something's not working. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Like, this doesn't seem right. And I was kind of blind to the internals of the tool. Now, while I loosely knew the mechanisms in there, I didn't make them. And all of my deep work was focused on code and bringing the theory of movement to life. But I didn't know, tolerance of certain components, where mechanisms may be skipping or not interlocking. So whenever something happened, it would always turn into a, "Hey Dave," text. "Come down and save me, something's wrong with your stuff." That's not what I would say, but that's what he would hear. And it was because I wasn't giving him a signal that I was putting just that extra little bit of thought into it. You know, did I try attaching and latching and unlatching the device multiple times? Did I try rehoming it? Did I have a couple plots of the data? You know, had I tested a couple other instruments? You know, and then giving a nice detailed report out of like, hey, this is the stuff I'm seeing. I'm a little bit concerned. If this is a problem, let me know. Let's stop the test and figure it out. Instead, it was, oh my God, Dave. So he actually gave me feedback of like, you know, put on somebody else's hat. Try to work the problem yourself, get more data. So that's kind of the first thing that I wasn't equipped to do in that blood explosion. Was I should have worked the problem a little bit. I should have thought to look at the procedure. I should have thought to just DM quality and be like, is this normal? Is this acceptable? Should have asked a couple people subtly. Should have looked at all my algorithm and make sure the right version was running from a code perspective, just so that I had data. So I think part of it is just a domain confidence issue. We have to be willing to step into other people's domains with confidence. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. All right, friends, we're doing good. Get on my head, we're almost at 3 miles. All right, friends, somehow, miraculously, there's 6 miles into this thing. And when I first woke up, I was apprehensive of doing a mile. I thought we were gonna bike today. So it's either adrenaline, and we're gonna have a lot of problems later, or we're actually running with good form and building strength. Who knows, I'm 32, so the body is unpredictable. 1 second, we have to jump this wet chasm. Come with me, friends. Ah. As soon as I get into variable terrain, that's when the knees like, ow, 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 ow. So you gotta be careful. Careful on the curves. All right, so next learning, mile 6. Kevin's good people. I learned a lot from Kevin over the 5 years that I worked for him. It's very rare, especially within J&J, to work for the same person for 5 years. People move around a lot, but it was an immense privilege to have his leadership over my life. It wasn't always sunshines and daisies. And often I wasn't the easiest person to lead. I think it's part of it as well. And often it was a square peg in a round hole, is how I felt within J&J at different times. But one thing I learned from Kevin in the blood explosion was like, words matter. He actually made me take words matter training, which, believe it or not, is a J&J legal corporate training to teach you what you can and can't say over email, over text, on a call. Because all this stuff can be dragged up in litigation. So, for instance, the way that I had worded some of my emails, let's say, for instance, down the road we do launch this product, and even though it operates within all the safe limits of our requirements, and our requirements are appropriately set, and it's a really good product, but nothing is perfect in the world. I mean, that's why you could have thousands of engineers at NASA and Lockheed Martin work on a Mars orbiter and have a unit conversion issue and just have the thing burn up in atmosphere. Like, regardless of how much money and people you throw at a problem, Murphy still lurks. He's still in the shadows. And say we had launched this product, and then unfortunately it's used in a patient. Surgeon attempts to seal a critical structure when doing, let's say, like a segmentectomy on your lungs. If you have a tumor in your lungs, they can often cut out a segment of your lungs so you can maintain some of your breathing capacity. Versus a lobectomy, they take a whole lobe. That's really bad. Well, it's not bad if you have cancer. You need to live an extra couple years, but oxygen intake, that gets rough, right? The post-operative is really rough, especially if you're old and have other comorbidities like obesity. So in the event we launch this device, they use it in a patient, and surgeon attempts to seal something. Surgeon moves to a different field of the operating space, like, I don't know why, but working on the stomach, and then moves down to the colon. That seal fails. Patient bleeds out. Blood starts filling the cavity, but surgeon can't work it quick enough, can't figure out what's going on, and then has to escalate from laparoscopic, where they're coming in through small ports, cuts the patient open fully, moves into open surgery, starts throwing a ton of gauze in there, trying to figure out the source. And then ultimately they find it. Patient lives, have a huge scar across their stomach. Maybe they have some other adverse outcome based on damage, like maybe partial kidney failure or something. I don't know, I'm making that up. But anyway, let's say there's some kind of lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson, either by the surgeon, by the hospital network, by the patient. These things happen, by the way. Well, then they could pull up this email that I fired off quickly in fear and be like, I could be deposed. Be like, well, hey, it seems like you had a pretty big situation here, and yet you still said you passed this test. Can you tell us more? It's like, oh shoot. Now, it doesn't mean you should ever lie. We should never mask details. But as I learned from Kevin, like, words matter, and being intentional about them is really, really important. Okay? Because words can also shift people's perspectives and feelings. As much as we like to think we are logical creatures, the majority of lawyers will tell you people make decisions off of feeling. Sure, they have to build a case that logically makes sense, or, you know, helps convince a jury about, you know, the probability that this individual was able to, you know, rape or kill somebody or whatever the crime is. But a large part of the discussion is how are they impacting the way the jury feels about said perpetrator. Because the feeling is where the verdict will follow. You know, that's why you see all the semantics at the end of those jury shows. Anyway, my battery's about to die. I'm gonna pop you on my head, but we're at about 6.5 miles. Means we got 2.5 left to go. We're struggle busting it, but I think we're gonna finish. So see you soon. Hey friends, 7 miles in. So far, still in it. Body's a little wonky, a little sore, a little chafed. My kids are up. My wife's having a hard time. I'm feeling that. So I gotta get home. But if I try to get home too quick, it'll turn into the trottle walk of doom. And we ain't want none of that, so let's just stay the course. The best that we were able. Yeah, even when you wake up at 3:30 to get up and go do these things, certain aspects of your life are unpredictable. So what have we learned thus far? Let's recap. We're 7 miles in. That means I get to chat with you right now at mile 7 and mile 8 and mile 9 when we finish. We did emotionally smoothing, massaging the messaging. That's a big learning from J&J that I've taken with me into global leadership. I've gotten much better with it. And I think the next area where we can navigate these things better is to adopt an Alexander Burr posture. Not only a posture of patience, wait for it. Sorry, I'm a huge Hamilton fan, so y'all have to deal, okay, as I break out in the song. Just kidding, I'm not gonna do that. Well, who knows? But the Burr posture, talk less. It is amazing how much smarter you sound when you shut up. And I mean it. Now, there's some people definitely need to find their voice. Some people need to find the confidence to talk more. And heck, I could do a whole run just talking about that, because that was also me in my career. But there are also moments where, when I'm under pressure, when I'm lacking confidence in a given domain, and when something is in crisis mode, I tend to talk too much. And a lot of people do. And one of the simplest expressions that any engineer should know, okay? Very simple sentence. Was it 3 words? 3 words. 3 words that I want you to practice with me right now. Every engineer ever, heck, any global leader, any entrepreneur, you know, when you're pitching to a VC and they find a huge gap in your strategy or a huge risk, and they question you or poke at it, or you're a global leader and you ran into a risk, you're navigating and you're providing context, but they're not convinced about your plan, or you're an engineer and a device blows up a pig. You blow up the whole pig in the lab, not even just our surgical devices should not explode inside the patient. There's no good therapeutic reason to develop that kind of technology. That's a bomb that has a different application. The 3 words, the build-up. You ready? It's a hard one because we're not conditioned to say this. We're conditioned to say anything but this, and it is the best thing you can say in almost any situation. I don't know. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. It is very different than saying I can't. Okay, we have similar connotations with the expression of like, I can't. It's like, well, go and figure it out. I'm sure you could if you try. I don't know. Now, there's a couple expressions you could wrap it with to position it better. But the reality is, nobody knows everything. I've been portraying a pretentious engineer for the past 4 years online. I've made 1,800 videos about science and engineering, math, leadership. A lot of content snarky and not helpful. And a lot of those snarky, sarcastic videos are just to kind of poke fun at the engineers that think they have it all figured out, when in reality, we often don't. There's often a piece or a component we're missing, and we're always on the quest to find it. Yet I've found the most transformational innovators I've ever met at J&J are comfortable with the expression, I don't know. And they don't always say it that way, but they also connect it with a capacity, a passion, and a commitment to figure it out. That's what we get paid to do, is to figure it out. But the problem is we feel vulnerable when this stuff happens and we don't have it figured out yet. So we overtalk, and when we overtalk and start postulating and letting emotions spiral and fail to regulate, we start lying. And we're not intentionally lying, but when engineers start imagining things outside the bounds of physics because they don't currently know the solution, and they feel vulnerable in a meeting or exposed because so much of our identity is wrapped up in this persona of intelligence, we lie. You know, we start hedging. Or the other one, we start blaming. We start pushing at other people's subsystems, and it turns out it reflects right back to ours. Not always, sometimes it is someone else's. But if we're deflecting to another subsystems owner out of insecurity, rather than saying, I don't know, there's 4 to 5 things that it could be within our system, here's our plan to look into it. It could also be some other factors from this team, we're not sure, so we need to triage it together and get alignment that we can prioritize this effort, because we don't have enough information yet to say it. That's a great expression too. We don't have enough information, enough data yet to make a decision. And we're always working with imperfect data, but a lot of times you start off with no data and what I like to call engineering intuition. And engineering intuition is great, but it could lead you to guess and to postulate, to blame, and to lie, versus saying, hey, I don't know. Here's what I think it could be, but we need to do some work. So, see you on mile 8. Got 2 more miles. Hopefully this is interesting. And hey, have you considered joining our weird little corner of the internet on Skool? By the time this goes out, our community's probably live, but you can join the wait list. There'll be a link in the description below. So if you're interested in finding your way as an engineer, a global leader, or an entrepreneur, I'm here to help. And ideally, you'll be able to secure your next best opportunity, new job, get yourself a 30% pay increase and a bonus. That's where I look to equip people first. But then we go into all kinds of topics around leadership, engineering, nerd stuff, talking, storytelling's a big part as well. So see you on the next lap. Let's get to work. All right, mile 8. Again, somehow we're still moving. I'm very surprised with where this run has landed. Whew, compared to some of my others, our pace is pretty darn clean. Form is decent. We're holding about 13-minute miles. We got 1 more mile left. Unfortunately, this mile has a whole host of stairs. So, and out of all the pain that we could be navigating, because it's been raining, my underwear are wet. This is gonna get personal, and they're twisting around, settle down. They're twisting around my right thigh and hung up. So I'm getting like a ring rash, a chafe. It's just, oh man, shower's gonna suck. Whenever you take a shower after a long run and you navigate chafe somewhere, you go to clean it and the burn. Ah! Anyway, that's my shower experience that's coming up. Friends, what do we have? What wisdom do we have? Do I have any more wisdom on this story? Is there anything else I could possibly squeeze? I was gonna try to cover, 9 different things that I've learned at J&J, and instead it's all learnings from one very key moment. So let me squeeze here. Let me think about one more thing that I got team. So we talked a little bit about the right way to pull people into a challenging situation. Here comes some stairs, I'll keep chatting. The right way to pull people in where we respect their time, we desire their input or feedback, we inform them of everything we know. Breathe. We inform them of everything we know. See who stops. My knee didn't like stopping there. And a minute. We inform them of everything we know. I'm still with you. Brain's a little foggy, but we're getting there. Sore, pain, ring chafe. You never want to hide something from your team. For some reason, even though it's incredibly unethical, it is a natural tendency of self-preservation of the powers that exist within industry for us to want to hide when things go wrong, for us to lie, for us to blame. And I don't know if anyone's ever perfect in these spaces, but you know, when we graduate college, some universities have this order of the engineer where you get a pinky ring on the finger you sign with. So every time you sign a document, sign off as an engineer, you hear the clink on the table of your pinky to kind of remind you of your engineering ethics. And unfortunately, one second. Unfortunately, based on the pressures we're put under, man, some days it's hard. It's hard to hear that ring clink. So I think one of the reasons I tended towards oversharing and sending out the barn's on fire kind of email was out of a desire of ethics. I never want to hide anything like that. I never want to obscure any data, even if it could be my software on the line. I want every set of eyes on it so we can figure it out and move forward ethically. And that's a part of it. But I think what I've learned is, like, you have to support your team with what you bring them into and what you navigate yourself. You have to bolster your confidence and your engineering intuition over time in parallel to including your team's perspective strategically. It's when you try to make something instant that you actually cause conversation loops and spirals. For instance, I could have looked at what was going on and recognized, hey, I think it could be one of two of these subsystems, most likely. Let me send out an email to the wider group, but let me message it, you know, to the two key people. Hey, this is what occurred. This is what I'm seeing from initial observations. I'm not sure, but there could be implications from your subsystems. If you have time today, check it out. And then from there, it gives the project director or the lead design the information they need to see, hey, the teams are working together, and they could choose, let the team work the problem, figure it out, and catch up in the middle of the week. Or the lead design decides, hey, I really got to play this one close to the chest. I need to be proximal what's going on. And he comes down also, right? So that's another way where you can really solve problems through team if you just communicate more proactively when stuff like this happens. And the big part, and again, this is something I wasn't equipped in this season of life, communicating the right information to the right level. Because a lot of times we start throwing out these spiraling email chains instead of managing expectations. Like, pro tip with the one I just shared, Sure, address it to the 2 subsystem owners that you think are the most key stakeholders right now. CC a few leaders, but then immediately, you know, reply to that message, but just to each individual leader separately. Be, hey Kevin, this happened. This is how I'm working the problem. I want to include, you know, Clark and Jeff on this, but I want you to be aware of it. If you feel the need to engage, that's on you. But this is what I'm doing, right? So then they can see that they don't need to be the first one to reply on every situation and set the strategy. The strategy's already moving. So we got 1 more mile, well, half a mile at this point, and stairs of doom. Check this out. This is gonna suck. Tuck your core. Oh my god, 9 miles. Well, technically for all of you who are counting, I don't know how you're counting. Maybe you're using some kind of object processing on this feed to actually correlate to Google Maps and calculate the distance, whatever. We're at 8.9 miles, okay? It's not 9. Get over it. Some of you are like, but are you gonna walk across the finish line on your half marathon? What if I do? That said, I normally end up running. In Japan, folks aren't used to seeing someone who's 6'3" and 300 pounds running as far as I run, so normally the applause provides enough peer pressure for me to push across the line and then collapse later. But hey friends, thank you so much for today's dialogue. This is so exciting. This is still an experiment, this podcast on a run kind of idea, but I like it. I used to live stream these, but I'm having a whole bunch of data issues that I have to use for critical meetings. It's a long story, I don't want to navigate. But the final wisdom as we round the block and head home and see if our knee actually holds up this week or not. I'm glad we pushed ourselves, but we'll see how glad I am tonight and tomorrow. This is a weird one in this situation. Lab blows up, you're navigating hurry, wait, you got all these pressures, you're thinking about firing off an email. Smile. Have fun. Okay? The work you do matters. In whatever context you're in, whether you're rolling a burrito, which I have so much thankfulness in my heart to anyone who's ever rolled me a burrito, because it really does change my day. And I genuinely mean that. Whatever you do, whatever you put your hands to, bring excellence. And even though it's difficult and challenging, smiling through it does make it more endurable. It doesn't mean that the situations you're navigating aren't critical. It doesn't mean that people might not end up, might have to work a weekend in order to work a problem and stay on timelines. Like, this stuff does impact people's day. But if you as a leader can find a little grit and smile through the discomfort, then the rest of your team can. I remember once, again, Mr. Kevin, thank you, Kevin. Maybe someday you'll see my stuff, but you're a busy guy raising all your kids and stuff. But I remember one day Mr. Kevin was sitting down with Dave, me, and all the other team members, and he's like, here's the situation. We're being asked to accelerate the project we're working on by 9 months. And he was like, so we're gonna have some what would it take conversations to figure out how that's possible from a resourcing perspective. That said, in another table conversation, the resourcing we requested wasn't gonna happen. And I just remember him telling us terrible, challenging news that would have an impact on our lives.
Total distance 9 miles.
Hey!
Total time 2 hours, 1 minute and 30 seconds.
That's proof.
Split pace 15 minutes, 36 seconds
I'll
per
take it.
mile.
So I remember him telling us terrible news that was going to impact our lives, and him smiling, and the rest of the team smiling. Where it was almost this, in Japanese, like a shogunai smile of like, it can't be helped, it is what it is, like, so let's go out and do it. But I'll tell you, if he was fully wearing strain on his face, we all would have. So wherever you're at, whatever context. Smile, bear through it, and bring people along on the journey, and you'll all get better. All right. See you around, friend. Keep changing the world.